let me get through some of the setups. My contact information is in here. These slides are in the Sessionize session so that you can actually go and look at them. There's additional material, my contact information, some references, so you can go and look at those. You've seen the abstract. Let me just zip through that. My background, that's also there. You can read about that if you care. So I was introduced to Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance at a DECUS, Digital Equipment Computer User Society, a symposium session sometime in the prior century, which gives you an idea how long I've been dealing with this stuff, that I attended as a lark. There really wasn't anything else going on at the time. I was there to pick up as much as I could, and I sat in on it. And it really was broadening for me because it opened up different ways of thinking about the problem solving. And so I come along, kind of share it. The book really is the single most informative document on problem solving really ever written. And it's a lot better than many of the other books that are written specifically for problem solving. It talks about problem solving with motorcycles and their engines in particular, but it really applies to life in general, or of course software development. It really is more informative than a lot of the corporate problem-solving books like Six Thinking Hats or Lateral Thinking, where they provide mechanisms for doing problem-solving in corporate structures. They don't really talk about the problem-solving itself. And the lessons in the book really do apply to what we do in our jobs, even if they're talking about motorcycles. Software is just as good or even better source of problems requiring solving than motorcycles. That's what we do all day. And pretty much all we do is solve problems or fix puzzles. And what we're doing is really more a science, more an art than a science. It's really a craft. And yes, I know we talk about software engineering and all that, but ultimately we're solving problems. It's a little bit difficult in this format, but when is your job most satisfying? When do you feel the most joy? It really is when you provide a good product, a good solution. Even if it's just a silly little thing. I talked about developing a little program for my watch in a talk yesterday. That all it does is bring up the famous 2001. I'm sorry, I can't. I'm afraid I can't do that. But it displays it on my watch, and it actually gives the sound. Right? It's a silly little solution, but it was fun. It was my way of learning, and I mean, it actually feels good. Right? It is quality that is real essence behind what you're doing and behind the joy you receive. Right? None of us like to do something lousy. We don't like to do some just kludged together code to make it work, to get it done. We want it to be right. Of course, it can be hard to solve problems. And how do you feel when you're not able to get a solution? Okay? The frustration, right? Or you can get a solution, but it's not a good one. It's not one you like, but it gets the job done. Okay? And that comes under something that we call gumption. Okay? It's the energy to maintain mental acuity under stress, to be able to solve problems, to be able to work through that. Why won't this one piece of code do what it's supposed to? And then another concept to it is stuckness. Right? You can't get past that problem. Why can't you? Right? And there are gumption traps. These are things that suck away your gumption, that leave you the less energy and more likely to get stuck. Right? So we've all experienced stuckness, right? We have a problem. We don't know what the cause is. Right? We don't know where to look. We don't know how to fix it. We may not even know what questions to ask. And of course, there's always outside pressure, and outside pressure doesn't help you get unstuck. If anything, it makes you more stuck. The stress. Right? If your boss, even the CEO, is standing over your shoulder, they're not going to help. They're not going to help you solve the problem. They're just going to add the pressure. And that stress feeds on itself, which makes it more difficult to solve the problem. So what has happened? Well, general Western thought has kind of failed you. Right? You know, we have a scientific method that's taught in schools. You ask a question, you do research, you build a hypothesis, you do an experiment to confirm, and then you do your data analysis, right? And of course, the conclusion, we're done. But what if you don't have a hypothesis, or you throw out a various series of hypotheses and they're repeatedly incorrect? Right? Well, then you start getting stuck because you can't find the solution. You start getting frustrated. Right? And this method is great to verifying truth in retrospect. Hey, was this the right solution or wasn't it? But it doesn't help you necessarily get to that solution. All right. And when you're stuck, you're trying to look forward. You're trying to find the solution. So, think about when you're stuck, when you have trouble finding something. You start looking, you can't find it. You thrash around looking in the same places. Right? Your keys, right? Where are my keys? I can't find them. I got to go to work. I'm going to be late. Boss is going to be pissed off because I'm late. Or the kids are going to get to school late, or I'm going to get late to pick them up at daycare, or whatever. Right? Yeah. The fear and anger cycle takes over. You're angry at being stuck. The pressure increases. The anger increases. The fear increases. The pressure increases. And it's this cycle. Okay? It causes you to start focusing just on the problem. Why can't I find my bleeping keys? Okay? Rather than the facts. Okay? And the cycle continues. Getting stuck can be deadly. Pilots. If pilots stuck in an emergency, they're going to die. And pilot training actually focuses on emergencies. The student has talked about the problems, solutions, causes, checklist on how to react. They go up in the air. They practice those. And then they debrief the results. Right? Pilot training, they go up in the air. The instructor reaches over, pulls the throttle, says, your engine just quit. Now what do you do? Now the engine didn't really quit. It's sitting there at idle. It's merely turning over. It's just not producing a lot of power. But the first reaction is, and you don't necessarily say it, but is, oh my God, I'm going to die. And you stop thinking because you're focusing on the dying part, which is normal human nature. And then the instructor says, well, the plane's in a glider now. What are we going to do? And you're still kind of reacting to that, I'm going to die. And then the instructor says, well, there's an airport right there. What are we going to do? And you're like, well, maybe I'll land at the airport. And you keep practicing this. And the next time you do it, well, it's not quite so bad. You still have a little bit of that reaction, but you can still start thinking, oh, wait, I can land the airplane. And you practice it over and over and over again so that you don't get stuck. And I had a situation flying where the engine was starting to fail. And my reaction was, oh, I've done this before. There's no stuckness. I've already done it. This is easy. I'm not going to die. I can deal with it. Okay? And if you look at a lot of military, medical, rescue service, they follow similar training practices. Well, we don't as programmers because every problem is a little different. Fortunately, we're not likely to die. But when you have stuckness, and what you need to do is you need to find a way to ease out of the stress, out of the anger, out of the fear, and find calmness. And Pirsig refers to it as becoming one with the problem. All right. And then you start sorting facts based on their quality. All right. What is the problem here? All right. Now, you have a mountain of facts. You don't recognize them. And the problem is, of course, you have to figure out which ones are the important ones. You know, what's relevant and what isn't. And while you're stuck, you've lost the ability to judge that quality because you have all these facts, and you know, one of them has to solve it. In reality, something trivial can be the biggest problem in your life. Pirsig talks about doing some work on an oil pan cover on his motorcycle, and he buggers up a screw. Now that screw, suddenly, this tiny little screw becomes the biggest problem in his life because it's critical path. Right? He can't put the motorcycle back together until he gets that screw. He can't ride the motorcycle until he has that screw. He can't go, you know, take his kid to school or you know, go to the campground or whatever it is they were planning on doing until he has that screw. It has become the critical path. And of course, it happens to us all the time. Yeah, you make some little change in the code, change your magic number, and it causes all kinds of problems. I mean, how many times have we heard, but I only changed this little thing? And that's why organizations are so serious about change control, because people just go in there and say, oh, well, I'll just make this little change. It's no big deal. One of the things to remember when you're stuck is you can always get unstuck. There's always a solution. The problem's going to go away eventually. It's only a matter of time. Of course, abandoning the problem is one way. And you know, I've heard one math professor refer to this as solution by erasure. Forget it. I'm not going to deal with it. Of course, solving the problem is the best one. You learn, right? You've picked up some skills. You become a better person because you've gained those skills. And you become a better problem solver if you start thinking about how you got there. Now, something to remember is just remembering that you've solved problems before, that you've gotten unstuck, can help you become unstuck. Right? Talking about the flight training. Hey, I've solved this problem before. All right. We didn't die when the engine failed. Oh, well, when it fails for real. Hey, I've dealt with this. Thing you need to think about is you need to get your ego out of the way. Right? These anthropomorphized systems seem to attack us when our ego's strongest, right? When it can't be me. Right? When I couldn't have done it. So you look at each problem as being unique. If you focus on, well, I solved it this way before, or I solved something similar before, it may lead you down the wrong path. All right? We solve problems by classifying them. That's the way we do Western thought. It's this way. It's this type of problem. But when we're stuck, we've messed up our ability to classify. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just pigeonholing it. Well, solve it this way. You have to look at each problem on its own merits, right? You have to look at all the facts. And it sounds kind of silly, but you, in some ways, actually have to unfocus. You have to focus more broadly, because you've started focusing really tiny, and the solution may be a little bit outside of that view, right? You got the small box, and the result may be outside of the box, right? What is happening? Because the problem may be something else. It may be outside of your control, right? What else is going on? Correlate seemingly unrelated facts back to the original problem. Could this be related? Could this be causing this weird bug that only happens on Fridays? Yeah, especially especially if they seem to be out of context, if they don't seem to be involved. We had a great little data warehouse, and we had non-deterministic load times, right? If everything ran normal, the reports would be done at about 9 a.m., about the time for the executives to be finishing up their coffee and start looking. It's great, unless there was a delay. The source system was heavily loaded because of transactions. There was a hiccup in the process, whatever the reason. And so an hour delay at 2 a.m., they didn't get the results till noon. And we just couldn't figure out why. And we kept looking. It was non-deterministic. We tried all the obvious things. We adjusted priorities. We kicked people off boxes. We just kept looking. And then it turned out I happened to be talking to one of our backup folks, folks involved in the backup system on the SAN. And we just happened to talk about, I was just grousing about my issue. And he says, "What time is that?" And he said, "Oh, it's normally done at 9. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's right. That's when the backup kicks off on the SAN. So it has no visibility onto the actual data warehouse box." Well, gee, now I know why my system is running so slow at 9 a.m. As a result, we made a minor change so that the backup became deterministic. It would kick off after our last report was done. So there's an hour delay in the middle of the night. Reports are delivered, an hour and 10 minutes late instead of hours late. And yeah, the backup runs most of the day, or a big portion of the day. Who cares? It's like more lightly loaded at that time. Okay. Asking silly questions when helping others. I'll go in and ask, okay, what was the last date of this file? What was, is this a data file here? Really, silly questions that usually are all answered readily. Until I find that one, and the person says, "Oh, yeah, that's the wrong version. Sorry." Because they had already decided that it was correct, because they didn't need to look at it. Their ego said, "Yeah, everything's cool. That part's okay." But when I asked, they had to answer. They didn't want to, and I'm like, no, trust me. Show me the directory. Show me the listing. Show me the date on that file. And it's really embarrassing when I've had to go to someone else for help. When I've gone in and put together the details to solve the problem for someone else, or I'm putting together this list. Okay, let me get all the modules in line, the dates, the versions, the source files, all this. It's like, oh. Person's walking over from their cube. I'm like, yeah, don't mind. Don't bother. I found it. Sorry, because I forced myself to look at every detail because I wanted to have it ready for them. I didn't want to respect their time. Of course, you want to take advantage of all the tools that are available, right? Traceback, crash dumps, diffs, error messages, debug statements. Your mic's active.
No, it's not.
Look at those things. Oh, they don't have the information I need. They may. Other people. Seek out those who will ask you troublesome questions, because they're going to force you to think differently. Right? Your experience, obviously, but if your experience was good enough, you wouldn't be here, right? And of course, the fountain of all knowledge, Google and discussion groups. The only catch is they may not be solving the same problem. They might give you a hint, but they might not solve it for you. Now, this all happens because our mind and our brain are kind of butting heads. pardon for the bad metaphor, right? The brain is really good at optimizing repeatedly used paths. Something that you do repeatedly gets easier over time. And think about the first time you drove the car down the block. Right? You had to pay attention to exactly how hard you pushed, your foot against the pedal to accelerate, and of course you jerked your neck, and how hard you pushed your foot against the pedal when you're coming to the stop sign, and you stopped 5 feet before that, and you probably wrenched your neck at the same time. Now, if you've been driving a few years, you get on the road, and you end up at your destination. You're like, how'd I get here? Right? You weren't chemically impaired. You weren't drunk. The repeatedly used paths just took over and said, yeah, well, we know how to drive. You can listen to the radio. You can think about your code problem. And so, unfortunately, these paths are not good if it's hard to stop using them. Right? So I'm looking for my keys, and I know I put them over there because that's where I put them every day when I come in, but they're not there. But my paths say my keys are always in that spot. Well, okay, maybe they fell behind. So I look behind the counter, all right, and they're not there. And so you say, well, maybe I left them in the door. You go look in the door, they're not in the door. And then you go back to where they were, right? And of course, they're still not on the counter. Well, it turns out you stuck them in your coat pocket. But the brain, the hardware says, yeah, let's go look for them there. And what you need to do is decouple the mind from what the brain is wanting to do. You're looking at the same code. Why isn't this working? What is this problem? The solution actually is pretty simple. You break away from the problem and exercise other pathways. So what you start doing is do something different. Yeah, sometimes you just have to walk away from it. Okay. Take a walk. Read an unrelated book. I know one guy who kept a copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance on his shelf. And he would just sit there and read a chapter or a few pages. Okay. Go out to lunch. Now, your boss isn't going to like that because it doesn't look like you're really working hard, that you're really solving the problem. But you build up trust with your boss so that they understand that you're really solving the problem, and then they'll start appreciating it. I've actually forced team members to break for lunch. It's like, no, I know you're having a problem. We're going to lunch. It doesn't matter what we talk about. We're going to talk about something other than the problem because we have forced different pathways to be working. I've actually solved some of my grodiest problems in the shower. Morning of my wedding. I'm taking my shower. My brothers are over the house. They're going with me to the wedding. We're going to get dressed together, whole family bonding thing. And I solved this problem that I had been banging my head against, an architecture problem, for weeks. And I'm there in my towel, and I'm scribbling on a piece of paper. My brothers see me like, have you lost your mind? It's like, no, just go away. Give me 5 minutes, because I didn't want to lose that thought. And frankly, I knew I didn't care about it for the next week. And what happened was another part of my brain, another set of pathways were working and came up with the solution. The book talks about gumption. Gumption is the perception of the quality of the thing we're doing. I've also heard this referred to as emotional bank account, although that tends to be used when they're talking about interpersonal interactions. Right? I do something for you, you'll do something for me. I treat you well, you'll treat me well, even if I'm in a bad mood. Those types of things. If we're doing good work, our gumption supply grows. Right? You heard me talk about my crazy little program on the watch, and I'm showing it off to everybody that I show off my new smartwatch to. Right? It's silly. Right? It doesn't do anything really fancy, but it's mine, and it works. We feel better, right? We feel pride in our work. I've done talks on work that I've done because I've thought that they were really great solutions. I had pride in that work, and hopefully other people see that. Okay? The work I become one. Right? My work is good. I am good. Right? My pride and self grows. Right? And of course, the opposite, unfortunately, is true. If my work is lousy, if I'm not doing a good job, if I'm not paying attention, I feel bad about what I do. I feel bad about myself. Okay? That supply of gumption, that emotional bank account, helps you solve problems. It helps you continue even when things aren't going well. If your supply is empty, the problem solving becomes harder. It's just like if you're tired, it's harder to do things. You've walked 20 miles today, you don't want to walk any further. You've been coding for 20 hours straight, you don't want to code anymore. It's the same idea. Right? So it's important that you pay attention to your supply, the flows and directions. Right? Is it coming in? Is it getting better? Right? Or am I depleting it? If it's leaking, you're giving it away. You need to restore it. And again, sometimes just stepping away, reading a loved book, thinking about something different. And there's concepts of gumption traps, things that are going to suck away your gumption. Things like dependence on a commercial mechanic. When you're taking things apart and putting them back together. Intermittent failures, that just kills me. Part or tool or information setbacks. And then there's a series of internal ones. And I love this Dilbert. His gumption has leaked away as he's working on this robot. He hasn't been able to fix it, to build it. And here's this one person who comes along and he realizes exactly what the solution is. Just because the person's title was sanitation engineer or trash person, trash collector, doesn't mean they're stupid. And they had the solution. Now that's really going to do wonders for Dilbert's ego. He has all this degree and theoretically a high-paying job, and the person who collects his trash fixed his problem. So, dependence on a commercial mechanic, consultants are the commercial mechanics of IT. And I've spent a lot of my career in consulting, often staff supplemental, when esoteric skills were not otherwise available. So one of the things I do is I make a point of sharing my knowledge. In some ways, it makes me more valuable. I've had a lot of repeat business, a lot of different projects at the same clients, extending my time. But it also means that I'm helping them grow. I don't want them to rely on me. If they rely on me, I'm stuck there. If I make them rely on me in the broader sense, where they want me to work on different things, I get growth. Right? It improves my gumption. And I've actually done things like charging for on-call coverage and travel time and minimum billing increments when they want me to be working at remote locations or overnight support. Because, frankly, being woken up at 2 a.m. doesn't do wonders for my gumption. And by making it harder for them, it makes it more likely that they'll get someone else to do the work, protecting my gumption, right? My growth, right? If you totally rely on consultants, your gumption supply is in trouble because they're going to get all the interesting stuff. And they're going to know more about your problem than you do. Now you're stuck with them because you can't take it over. Right? And in a way, it makes you weak. And even if you don't consciously realize it, you know it. You know you're relying on that person. A good consultant will teach you as the work goes along. Right? They'll cross train, right? Because they want to wean off of that project. So working with them actually improves your gumption. It gives you a growth path. And in reality, it may cost more money or time to work that way, at least in the short term. In the long term, you grow more people, you have more capability as an organization too. And of course, when you learn to solve problems, not only do you gain directly, you restore your own gumption, and you're improving your future problem-solving solutions. Like I talked about, you've done it before, you know how to solve it again. When you're pulling things apart, putting them back together, like an upgrade, it's a situation where it doesn't quite go back together, it doesn't quite work. The rebuild with that new library just doesn't work because something has changed. Maybe a bug was fixed, or maybe a new bug was introduced, or maybe something's changed with a feature. Right? And when you're talking about hardware, assembly out of order, you have a screw left over. Right? With software, wrong or incompatible versions, lost pieces. You do know where all your source code is, don't you? I've actually had to re-engineer pieces of code because modules were lost. That wasn't much fun. If you can't find that piece or figure out where it goes or why that link won't work, right? Why that module doesn't behave properly, what's called gumption desperation follows, right? Because you get in that cycle. Why won't this compile? It compiled yesterday. Why won't it print right? Why is the display weird? Well, something else has changed. The idea of engineering notebooks, blogs, knowledge management systems, they help. You log everything you do. Right? What order did I install these applications in the past? I keep an actual paper log. I keep a lot of online logs too. Right? But I can reference things literally back decades if I need to. And I've gotten calls back, hey, why does this thing happen this way? Well, I could try to remember, and frankly, I'm not going to, or I can look at my docs. Things like make certainly help you, but things can get missed. Always read the release notes. Unfortunately, they don't usually go into enough detail. There's hidden issues even with the best documentation. Intermittent failures, the bug that seems to go away and come back, or only certain days of the month, or I actually had I literally spent days tracking down a failure in dynamic memory allocation. Memory would allocate, things would run great, and then there'd be an error. Malloc failed. Well, how does Malloc fail? And of course, it never happened when I was testing, and it was always when one of the users was doing their work. And I tried all the things. I adjusted, made sure we had enough memory, page memory. This was when systems didn't have huge memory systems, enough disk space, permissions, I even came in on the weekend, so it would be a lightly loaded system. Long story short, because it was a long story, one of the other developers ran outside of their memory space, right? They fence posted and messed up the internal data structures within Malik. And it had nothing to do with the operating system. It was their code. You know, the dreaded one byte too far, but it wasn't an obvious problem. And I tried running debugger and none of that. And they generally don't heal themselves. They're here now, and they're gone by the time you look at them. Or they can't be readily repeated because the user, when they got it, had done 20 steps before, and when they go and show you again, they only do the last 3 because they've forgotten the other steps they had done that day. Yeah. And they're infuriating because they do go away on you. Or the warehouse loads perfectly fine every day unless there's a delay in the middle of the night. And of course, they're embarrassing because they come back. Why can't you fix this? Why is this happening? What? I thought you solved this last time. You know, it's worse because the problem isn't there when you call someone over for help, or you call in the commercial mechanic. You call in the consultant. Cars, motorcycles, software, doesn't matter. I tell a story about my wife has a problem with her PC. She calls me over. Problem's gone away. It happens with some of my coworkers too. And you know, it's not because my wife's a woman. It's just I'm bringing a different viewpoint to it. I'm asking different questions. I'm doing it a different way. Yeah. This is changing, but rebooting seems to help, and for a long time was the preferred solution under Windows. And we had a third-party vendor, Cognos, which is an OLAP application, and it would start getting flaky. It just would throw weird errors. And if we would reboot on a weekly basis, that seemed to solve the problem. And we started looking into it, and we couldn't see anything obvious. And so we just set up an automatic weekly reboot of the server. No one's using the report Sunday morning. Reboot it. Problem went away. And I'm sure they've upgraded over the years, and hopefully they've taken the reboot out because they don't need it anymore. But you know, I hated that solution, but it wasn't worth investing the time to the organization. Because rebooting does mask the real problem, whatever it may be. The more you know about your environment, the deeper you can analyze, right? Like the backups happening on the SAN that cause the non-deterministic loads. Yeah, the more you learn, the more you know, the more gumption you have. And with the intermittent problems, you need to look elsewhere. What else is intervening? What else could be causing this? Why are my loads so much longer? Okay. What else is happening? What you're doing is you're looking for a new hypothesis, something totally unrelated. Broader focus. Now we have tool problems, something you've already solved, or you know, maybe it's a new version, it doesn't work, right? Or you can't get to a solution. Hey, I need this piece of code. Oh, sorry, it's not in our license, or it's we're not allowed to use downloaded software in this organization. Our regulators won't let us. No, there's no money in the budget to buy it. Or, yeah, it's available in the next version, but we're not going to upgrade to that for 6 months. Hardware, you can't get the parts; they're too expensive, or you order it, you get the wrong one. The delivery is delayed; it gets shipped to the other side of the country because the postal service is messed up today. It's all kinds of the same thing, and you're sitting there, working around buggy library code that you've already been fixed in the next release. You can't get the license. Depending on how you look at it and how you treat it, it's either extreme frustration or a great learning opportunity. And this is back in the dark ages, we were working on an application that we needed a screen handler for, right? Handle form. And we weren't allowed to buy it because we didn't have any capital money. So we ended up writing one as consultants because they had repair money, and that's what we were being booked as. So it was kind of frustrating in the beginning. It ended up being a great learning opportunity as I got to work on this screen handler and understand the non-deterministic way that people operate screens. But for a while there, it was a bummer. The worst ones are the ones that you've solved, but whatever condition actually brings it back, it actually isn't really solved. I'm gonna skip over the internal gumptions. They're basically things to you, internal to you. Value, right, where you block effective understanding. Truth traps, right? You block the cognitive understanding. You're not really thinking about it. You don't understand what is the truth of the matter. Right? And what's referred to as muscle traps. Now that's more a mechanical thing, right? You know just how hard you can tighten the bolt so it'll stay tightened but not break off. But we also have those in IT. Right? I know how much I can expand a field before we'll start running into memory problems or performance problems. We've talked about a number of Gumption traps. Part of the key is identifying that when you are in one of these traps so that you can find a way out of it. Even if you avoid the traps, you can still get stuck. But when you understand what's happening, it will help you to resolve the problem. And in closing in the book, and Pirsig comes along and says, some could ask, well, if I get around these Gumption traps, then will I have the thing licked? The answer, of course, is no. You still haven't got anything licked. You've got to live right, too. It's the way you live that predisposes you to avoid the traps and see the right facts. You want to know how to paint a perfect painting? It's easy. Make yourself perfect and then paint naturally. That's the way all the experts do it. The making of a painting or the fixing of a motorcycle isn't separate from the rest of your existence. If you're a sloppy thinker 6 days of the week, you aren't working on your machine. What trap avoidances, what gimmicks can make you all of a sudden sharp on the 7th? It all goes together. If you're a sloppy thinker 6 days of the week and you really try to be sharp on the 7th, then maybe the next 6 days aren't going to be quite as sloppy as the preceding 6. What you're trying to come up with on these gumption traps, I guess, is shortcuts to living right. If you know why you're getting angry about something, you can de-escalate. Hey, stop pushing my buttons. Hey, I just need to step away. Right? If you know your gumption is fleeting, you can work on avoiding it. A couple thoughts about the book itself. Pirsig can be hard to read. After all, he was a tech writer for IBM, and there is a joke in there somewhere. And he spent some time in a mental hospital. So where he talks about that history, it can be painful. But you can learn a lot from him, and it's the kind of book that you read on the beach or some quiet evening, chapter at a time, couple pages here and there, and then you go back and read it again and again over the years. Any questions?
Well, I'll try to ask a question here. How do you relate the concept of your presentation to more standard development techniques. Like some of the stuff we do with paired programming and other design and standard engineering techniques like analysis, design, build, analysis, design, build. You related it nicely to the scientific method, which absolutely has a place, but is not the end all and be all. So, how do you reconcile the philosophies is the question.
Well, so when you're doing analysis or design, you're engaging in a creative process, right? Pure analysis, okay. Data comes in, data manipulated, data output. That's sort of easy. It's when you're trying to now create something with it. Right? How do I get the calculation right? How do I manipulate this data in a form that isn't going to take 2 weeks to process a daily file? That's something I deal with on a regular basis with the high volumes of banking data I work with. And this doesn't tell you how to do that, unfortunately. It's a lot of that, and this is why I say it's more an art than a science. It's something internal. This is where you just do. I can't paint. I don't have, whether it's the eye or the hand, to paint pretty pictures. I know it. Right? I can't do it. No one's going to be able to teach me to do it. I could do something rudimentary. I could take classes. I just don't have it. And if you look at really good developers, really good designers, really good modelers, right? They have a certain spark, a something that just gets them there, and it's not so much teachable. You can teach a lot of the thought processes to get from the creativity to the result, but not the underlying. And I'm sorry that doesn't give you the answer you want, because we'd love to be able to say, oh, okay, we'll send our people to this class, or we'll make them read this book or do this exercise, and suddenly all of our problems will be solved in 10 minutes. And the vendors certainly keep trying to do that. The next language will do it. Computer-aided software engineering will do it. Agile will do it. And these methods give you frameworks and give you may help you with some ways of thinking, but they don't solve the underlying problem. Right? They don't give the underlying solution. I've included a number of references, and as I said, they're in the PDF in the files section, that are some good places for ways of thinking. Peopleware is a great book on how to deal with the people in a problem. If you have a series of a team that's sitting there working, and their Skype is going off every 2 minutes, how creative are they? They're not, because they're constantly interrupted. They're not making the innovation, or they're coming in at 2 a.m. to do it, right? Because it's quiet. And I try to avoid vacation at the end of the year because I have no interruptions. I love that time because I'm in there and I'm solving problems because people aren't bugging me. And Peopleware actually talks a lot about those things. Yeah, we want everybody to be available and help and answer questions. But then you're frustrating them and you're sucking their gumption away, and they just start becoming drones rather than creative workers. And a lot of it really is about how you treat the people, how they can get their creative time. And it doesn't show up on any of the corporate surveys, either because they don't ask the right questions or because people aren't going to be honest and maybe put a target on their back, where they're going to say, if I just had 3 hours a day where no one bugged me, I'd be so much happier. Sorry, I can go down that path pretty far.
No worries. We're really talking about philosophy, so
yeah.
It's kind of a wandering discussion, and it wasn't an issue of looking for a specific answer. It was, I read this book 30 plus years ago and teach high school students engineering, and it's really interesting to see them slowly understand the difference between math and science and building and critical thinking skills. like the analysis, design, build phase,
Mhm.
and thinking about, a specific problem and how systems work together. So there is a philosophy to engineering, and most people just can't grasp that. So it is a worthy discussion.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.